Air Force flyers on patrol for drug traffickers may have intercepted something far more exotic.
Take a look at this. They videotaped fast-moving lights that seem to be flying in a rough formation, tracking their plane. The pilot says that they first saw one light, then 3, then up to 16 lights were following them, as seen in these images broadcast on Mexican TV. The pilot says that he was not able to get close enough to identify the UFOs, but said that he has never seen anything quite like this. The plane was on routine patrol over the Campeche region of Mexico, looking for drug-related air traffic. What could it be?
See, now I'll be scared driving home tonight. Listen to Art Bell.
Do you realize that while you weren't looking, while you were paying attention to politics or terrorism or even immigration problems, while we were all caught up in our American fears, we may have been invaded by aliens? Welcome to Madisel TV. I'm Clyde Lewis. Tonight we take on a subject that you might think have a little cynical attitude about. You may think that it's something that doesn't apply to you now because we're in the midst of terrorism and war. But there is something that I want to talk about that hasn't been touched on in the mainstream recently, and that is UFOs, aliens, and extraterrestrial entities. Now, you may think that they are all part of fantasy and you want to have nothing to do with it. You may want to change the channel, but I want to tell you, don't change the channel tonight, because this program is going to tell you that while we weren't looking, they were coming. The aliens, the UFOs, they're here. And tonight, you're going to be enlightened.
There is one subject that receives almost no serious attention from the mainstream media. That, of course, is the subject of UFOs. Outside of a recent documentary hosted by the late Peter Jennings, there has been no real investigation into the who, what, where, and why behind the UFO phenomenon. This is despite the fact that millions of people from around the globe have witnessed and photographed phenomena that cannot be explained. If the subject of UFOs is even brought up in polite society, you can count on a dismissive laugh. Why is that? I think it is because we have all been programmed to believe, or in the case of UFOs, to not believe. Why that is, I can't say. But despite this fact, more and more sightings are reported every year, including the proliferation of gigantic, mathematically and artistically magnificent crop circles. And the range of UFO researchers who do take the subject seriously include engineers, scientists, journalists, and a prominent, highly credentialed, Harvard-educated psychiatrist, the late John Mack. John Mack died in 2004, the victim of a hit-and-run driver. But before he died, he succeeded in interviewing and analyzing over 100 people who claimed to be abductees, who reported incredibly traumatic and moving experiences with extraterrestrial beings. In an interview with the PBS series Nova, Dr. Mack answered the question of whether these phenomena are physical or spiritual. To quote Dr. Mack, "There is I believe, a gradation of experiences that go from the most literal physical kinds of hurts, wounds, person removed, spacecraft that can be photographed, to experiences which are more psychological, spiritual, involve the extension of consciousness. The difficulty for our society and for our mentality is we have a kind of either-or mentality. It's either literally physical or it's in the spiritual other realm, the unseen realm. What we seem to have no place for, or we have lost the place for, are phenomena that can begin in the unseen realm and cross over and manifest and show up in our literal physical world." So the simple answer would be, yes, it's both. It's both literally physically happening to a degree, and it's also some kind of psychological, spiritual experience occurring and originating perhaps in another dimension. And so the phenomenon stretches us, or it asks us to stretch, to open to realities that are not simply the literal physical world, but to extend to the possibility that there are other unseen realities from which our consciousness, our, if you will, learning processes over the past several hundred years have closed us off. Perhaps finally, after over 50 years of eyewitness accounts and research, including the famous government-funded Project Blue Book, the UFO phenomena will get some much-wanted attention from the mainstream media. There are many new TV programs that feature UFOs, though usually from the point of view that the aliens are out to get us. And a few sightings have been reported in mainstream media, such as the Phoenix Lights. But whether the media reports about them or not, UFOs continue to afford us the opportunity to stretch our imaginations and to see beyond the walls of our physical boundaries into a world of magic and mystery.
With me is Dr. Larry Johns, and he's with the Portland Alien Museum, portlandalienmuseum.com. Brought him into the studio today to talk about some of these subjects and to actually open your mind to some possibilities that you may never have thought of regarding aliens, extraterrestrials, and UFOs. First of all, Dr. Larry Johns, you heard what Courtney had to say, what John Mack had to say about the spiritual experience and the physical experience. In your opinion, what do you think is happening here?
Well, I think Courtney was very, very correct. The point is that the experience of the UFO or the extraterrestrial cannot be divorced from experience in general. That is, during the 50s, for example, when we were worried about atomic war and we were worried about the self-destruction of the planet, there was a plethora of sightings. Here in Portland, we have newspapers in the museum, the Journal, the Portland Journal, and the Oregonian. They were coming out of the buildings to see all the flying saucers going overhead. Now, were these collective hallucinations? Were they real? I think it's a little combination of both.
We had the wave here in the Northwest long before Roswell. I think that we need to point out that we had the sightings over the Cascade Mountains. We had the McMinnville sighting.
Yes.
We had the Maury Island affair happening in Washington State. A number of things that were happening here in the Northwest before Roswell even came into being, seeing these things and physical UFOs in the skies. And you're talking collective hallucination, reality, exotic aircraft that was being experimented with the governments, what?
I think, as I said, I think it's both. I mean, if we could think of it in the concept of a dream, we all have our individual dreams, but there are certain archetypes, there are certain standard sets of dreams that we all have.
Right.
And we don't exactly have control over these dreams either. What's interesting about the UFOs, even if they're caught on, the modern kind of cameras, is that they tend to disappear, just like objects in our dreams disappear. In other words, they're there, they look solid, and then they're gone. And the explanation is, well, they went into another dimension, or they had such anti-gravity device that they just zoomed out. But if you were to look at them, they occur very much like they would in a dream. They're there, and then they're not there.
However, recently, I mean, a lot of the people, I'm sure, that are watching this program now, and a lot of people who've already got their mindset of what UFOs are. The skeptics say, well, we all know that the photos are always blurry. We all know that there's nothing definitive. And yet they ignore the data that has come out recently since, there was 2001 prior to 9/11. There was the Newark, New Jersey case where people got out of their cars on the turnpike and they looked up and they saw what they thought looked like some angelic experience in the sky, orbs in the sky. And then, of course, the most compelling of all UFO stories out of recent, well, there's a lot of them we're going to talk about tonight that are really going to blow people's minds.
Right.
The Mexican UFO case, where they were looking for drug traffic. The Mexican authorities were looking for drug traffic. They were in their aircraft flying, and then all of a sudden, the radar systems go weird, and they start vectoring in on targets, and they didn't see any targets.
The most interesting thing, Clyde, about that particular case is that the Mexican Air Force and the Mexican government, for the first time in history, said, yes, these are UFOs and we want to investigate it. In other words, they came out front and they said, we don't know what it is, it's something strange, let's put all of our scientific acumen and figure out what this was, instead of just saying it was a hallucination, covering it up, or whatever. Now, of course, in the United States, because there have been a lot of leaks, there have been a lot of stories about mostly the retrieval of craft and the reverse engineering of alien technologies. All of these sort of interesting put a puzzle together, because the government didn't tell us what really happened in Dallas. They haven't told us a lot about what's going on. Why should they tell us about aliens if
Well, they
they're
haven't
even
told us
real?
anything about 9/11 either.
Right, they haven't. So the point is that you're dealing with really a hidden government, hidden powers that have higher security, if you will, than the president and the Congress and so forth.
What the audience probably doesn't know tonight is there are several governments, China, India, several governments that have now they've basically opened the cases wide open, saying, yes, it is a reality.
Yes.
They have, there's the Cometa report in France, a number of reports that say, yes, this is a reality. Many of them say they show no signs of any aggressive behavior. However, there are a lot of people who are discussing this saying, well, you know, we have reason to believe that they are hostile. We have reason to believe that there are problems, that these beings are tinkering with certain equipment. And then we have reports that these beings turn off. Like there was a case in Montana where they turned off a missile silo. We have all these strange cases of how these beings or these craft or whatever they are interfering or otherwise tinkering with our lives. They're a part of our experience.
Well, we are tinkering with our lives, and I think that's where they're combined. We're at war now. I mean, we are, you know, there's war in the Mideast again. There's threats from North Korea again. So we're in a situation of high anxiety in which a lot of the demons inside our brains start coming out,
Wow.
and these become projected in terms of UFO experiences.
It's interesting because I'm reading this book currently. I don't know if we can get a shot of this book. It's by William Bramley. He's a lawyer. He's written a book called The Gods of Eden, and this book was written back in, I guess, 89. And the book was written in 89, and it deals with what William Bramley set out to do was write a book about war and the history of warfare. And what he found in every point throughout history about warfare and about the changing of governments and the changing of the guard is that UFOs and beings from other planets, or beings from the ether, if you will, start showing up in stories where they interfere with our lives, and they bring with them diseases, they bring with them devastation and cataclysm, and they report that these I guess these beings, if you will, bring with them all kinds of strangeness, and people start acting like they're harbingers of doom. And
independent of this discussion, I would say that there's a major influx of just hardcore insanity in the world. I mean, something is wrong with the world. It's wrong with our leaders, but also wrong with the people. We're afraid, we're traumatized, and it's not going to take much to tilt us into war. It's really not going to take much.
You're saying then we are projecting this?
Well, it kind of goes together, doesn't it? In
Well,
other words,
but okay, now you're saying that we could be projecting this, and we could be projecting a lot of it, because, I mean, we do know that the mind has the capacity of creating things and hallucinating.
I believe so. Well, not just so. I think that the mind, the intent of the mind can produce material.
Okay, so what we're looking at now is, okay, you're saying that the mind can produce this material, and that what is first conceived here is going to materialize here.
Well, but the point is, it doesn't have to be the individual. It doesn't have to be me or
Collective
you.
consciousness.
It's the collective consciousness, and the collective consciousness itself could be some sort of a conduit or a transducer for other consciousness, either in a different dimension, a different galaxy, etc.
Well, what we have is we have the Mexican UFO sightings, we have the other UFO sightings, like the Newark sightings,
Right.
and we have people who are doing investigations and have great footage of these craft. One guy in particular is David Cerritos. He is a investigator for LAUFO.com. I've been in contact with him several times.
Right.
He has produced some of the best daylight UFO footage you'll ever see. And he's also investigated and commented on what he's seen. And he's also done photographic comparisons of airplanes, helicopters, and the like. And he has spoken many times about this. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to go to a clip of David Saritas talking about the technology. I'd like to have David Saritas, we're going to have David Saritas talk from laufo.com. And what he's going to do is he's going to discuss with us here on this program what he's observed as far as these aircraft and what they might be and what they are. And so we're going to go to a clip from the UFO reality of David Saritas, a UFO investigator from California, who has taken UFO footage from Sonora and other places, and he's compared it, and he's got some fascinating things to say about what he's discovered right here.
When you consider the idea of a UFO arriving at Earth, which is allegedly a spacecraft coming to Earth from another star system, these craft would have to be able to go at least at the speed of light, which is 186,282 miles per second, which comes to 670 million miles per hour. Our fastest jets can do 2,000–3,000 miles an hour on Earth today. The space shuttle does 18,000 miles an hour as it orbits around the Earth, and the Apollo missions to the moon were in the several thousand miles per hour range. So we're nowhere near those kind of velocities on our current propulsion systems that we use for, for jets and for spacecraft. So when you consider the magnitude of these propulsion systems and energy systems, this whole presence, the whole UFO presence, beckons us with, for one, an energy source and an energy system that is far superior to anything we have on Earth, velocities that are far superior to everything we have on Earth, air superiority that is literally the most intimidating thing to our military. I mean, the very presence of UFOs, I think, is so terrifying to our military because we suddenly realize that something out there, an intelligence out there, is so far beyond us. If they wanted to, they could literally take over the whole planet in a military sense. I mean, they could put us in a position where we would be subservient to them. So I think that's one of the reasons why there is such secrecy around the UFO phenomena, is our governments of the world do not want to admit that they're in a position where we could lose all power on this planet. Now, when we consider the amount of energy it would take in the form of propulsion to arrive at Earth, doing the speed of light on, our current approach to propulsion, obviously they would be far more superior to us, but how are they doing it? I mean, how are UFOs able to conquer these huge distances? How are they able to go at least the speed of light or beyond? Well, in a sense, there is a race to understand these propulsion systems, because the next person, the next country, the next military power that truly understands anti-gravity propulsion systems, that really masters it, will have air superiority on this planet. And that means that there is a race to understand this. If we lose that race, if the United States loses that race, then we stand to lose the superior military position on this planet. We could be taken over in a day if China or Russia were able to do even a quarter of the speed of light or a tenth the speed of light. The tenth the speed of light is 67 million miles per hour. Anti-gravity technology, high-speed turns, sudden stopping, being able to accelerate beyond the vicinity of this country in a flash means that we are going to be subjugate victims to this power. So to me, the idea that we're not studying UFO propulsion systems and UFO cases seriously in the United States and in China and Russia in their universities, they're actually taking the phenomena seriously. Are we willing to risk that? I mean, as a nation, are we willing to keep laughing at the UFO phenomena and saying that none of this is real, and laugh at it and say that, well, this has got to be a figment of somebody's imagination? But what we're seeing here in Venice, California, and Sonora to come is clear footage that something's going on in our skies that we cannot explain. And I really believe a very prompt and very serious investigation is warranted here in this case, and we've got to look much deeper into the phenomenon.
So what we're looking at is we're looking at a phenomena that, as we said in the beginning, it could be spiritual, it could be physical, but more physical now than ever, and looking at it from a standpoint of a threat to national security. I mean, even if it isn't an extraterrestrial urban assault vehicle where you can kick the tires and honk the horn, it could be a missile that's headed right for us. I mean, with North Korea sending off missiles, and if we're not being told what these things are. I mean, it could be debris. It could be, I mean, a UFO could be a debris. It could be something like an asteroid. It could be a missile. And in the case of the Mexican UFO footage, I mean, describe a little bit. This was back in 2004. I believe it was March of 2004. These planes that were flying and looking for drug traffickers were alerted to the presence of something, right?
Right. By their infrared detectors and other detectors and other frequencies.
So they couldn't see it with their eye?
No, they didn't know it was there until they went back through the evidence of what they were doing. But the point again is that the Mexican government said, this is important, we need to investigate this. And they weren't able to get very far. But at least they were admitted that they were saying, if you know something about this phenomenon, come, we'll try to figure it out what's going on.
Well, this is the thing that prompted me into understanding and to thinking very strongly about the possibility of an alien invasion from the standpoint of these vehicles or these lights that you're going to be seeing. We're going to roll the clip in just a minute. What we're going to be seeing is we're going to be seeing the Mexican Air Force radar picking up on, and they're vectoring. You'll see the X's. Those X's are targets for firing. They want to fire on them. And they were invisible. And they began with 3, then 4, then they divided, and then there was like 9 lights following these aircraft. And I mean, I've listened to the radio transmissions. These pilots were frightened. And so what I want to do now is just a short clip here. And it's just dramatic to see the short clip of this. Because, I mean, and there's also been news reports about it. It was one of the most covered UFO sightings ever in a long time. We're going to go to the clip right now and show you what exactly was going on with the UFOs over Mexico. This is some fascinating stuff. Take a look.
She's saying, careful not to touch your microphone, Clyde.
First saw 1 light, then 3, then up to 16 lights were following them, as seen in these images broadcast on Mexican TV. The pilot says that he was not able to get close enough to identify the UFOs, but said that he has never seen anything quite like this. The plane was on routine patrol over the Campeche region of Mexico looking for drug-related air traffic. What could it be?
See, now I'll be scared.
There you go. That was taken from a KIFI report, TV8 in Idaho Falls, Idaho. They did a report there. And also there was some untouched footage that was being released to a lot of organizations talking about this very thing. And Portland, Oregon just recently had some UFO activity here where they were seeing red lights over the Willamette Valley. I've seen a flying triangle before in the Willamette Valley. This technology is just, what do you think? I mean, you see this, we've shown you that. Now what? I mean, is it still a part of a figment of our imagination?
Well, I don't believe that our imagination is a figment. I mean, I think that in that sense, the world itself is a figment. I mean, we see a studio, we see rocks. These are all based on sense perceptions that come back to us and help us survive by getting around in the world. Now, we have dreams at night, and there are psychics out there and sensitives who can see things that we can't see. So it's, in some sense, it's really important in this Mexican thing that the instruments all picked this up, because it wasn't a psychic on the plane saying, I see UFOs. But the instruments were there, and in fact, what didn't come out in that particular report was that they tried evasive maneuvers. And the UFOs, and they weren't really lights because it was infrared, so they were balls of energy, were following them, they were going ahead of them, they were going around, they surrounding them in a circle, almost in a military point of view, and then they disappeared.
Right. And there was also reports of the same kind of lights over Mexico that formed a cross before Katrina hit Florida, and before Katrina hit Louisiana, I mean.
Yeah.
And so there were UFOs that were the prelude to the storms. The UFOs are prelude to the earthquake that happened in Indonesia.
As you were saying before.
I mean, like Gods of Eden says, whenever these things come, you can expect some really strange stuff to go down prior to. And then so we've had all these UFOs appearing. Now we're at war, and and it's not just the radar. We've got people now, Larry, who have mini cams, and they have cell phones where they can hold them up and they can say, "Take a look at this. I got this on film."
Right.
As a matter of fact,
I get more than one a week of people who are saying, "I caught something. I caught something. I caught something." There are some anomalies that can happen due to the process, but if you're catching them, there was a guy that came into the museum had an incredible photograph of 30 small UFOs. They're probably only 6 feet in diameter at the Blues Festival in 2002.
Right. I caught those. They were very
Yeah.
fascinating. But as I said, you know, they catch them on film. They catch them on their cell phones. And, you know, one of the things that impresses me the most is anyone can send me evidence that says, well, we saw some funny lights in the sky and they're in the dark, right?
Mm-hmm.
It could be anything. It could be a plane, could be oncoming landing lights, could be anything. But what really gets me is when you get video footage, and we're going to show a clip coming up, video footage of a daylight UFO, and this is a daylight flying triangle, the tripod light triangle flying over California. And this is some remarkable footage. And you're going to be looking at that going, wow, what is this? Because, you know, this is stuff that they don't scramble the planes to intercept them. And in my opinion, if you see something like this in the sky, I think that you'd want to have national security involved, calling the air traffic controllers, calling someone and saying, what the hell is this? Because this is some pretty dramatic footage that you're going to be seeing, and we're going to go to a clip right now. This is, once again, courtesy of David Sarita at laufo.com. David Sarita has compiled a lot of great UFO footage, daylight UFO footage over California. And this is the impressive stuff, because usually nighttime footage can fool you. It could be flares. It could be anything. But daylight footage, that's unmistakably bizarre. This is the good stuff right here. So what we're going to show you now, we're going to show you a clip, and this is going to be of a daylight flying triangle. It looks nothing like something that we fly. Go ahead.
I've got 3 lights in a triangular formation.
Oh, my friend, I wish I could even see it. You got eyes like a hawk.
Oh my god.
Where are they?
It's above the tree line. It's moving to the south again. There's no FAA light on that thing.
Keep going.
Go get him. Go get him. Go get him. Go get him.
They're gone.
Call him on the phone.
Are you sure?
Yes, this is, oh my god. What the hell is that?
Are you sure?
There's no FAA light on it. It's going behind the tree now.
Which one, the big tree?
That pine tree right in front of me. That little pine tree.
Yeah.
It's behind those branches. You didn't see it?
There you have it, daylight UFO footage. Is some fascinating stuff. Daylight UFO footage is fascinating. And, you know, you look at it and you're saying, well, maybe it is one of ours. Maybe it's something that we have created. Maybe it's something that our government knows about and they're not telling us what it is. The fascinating thing now is, and many of you probably don't know this, but there is actually a man by the name of Gary McKinnon. Now, Gary McKinnon is being extradited from Great Britain to the United States because he hacked into Pentagon and military computers. And Larry, tell us about Gary McKinnon and what he did.
Well, Gary McKinnon had a very, how can you say, almost sort of scientific and somewhat naive motivation with some very simple software. He read a magazine, I think, called Hacker Magazine, and he wanted to go into the U.S. government military files and find out what there was in, on UFOs. What were they hiding? And he also wanted to find some free energy, because he was hoping that there were some free energy devices there. And what he found some very, very interesting stuff. One of them was a roster of off-planet officers and ships in the United States Navy. And maybe you want to go into that a little bit
Well,
further.
what I understand is that he was going through the documentation. And in the documentation, there was a roster, and it was called non-terrestrial officers, which meant officers that serve outside of planet Earth. And the names he did not recognize because, he didn't know anything about personnel. The names were kind of bizarre. And then he said that he also found names of ships, names of certain types of spaceships or space platforms that did not have any names to ground or to sea battleships. So they were all named different. There were different names for things out there. And then he moved to another file, and I guess you could say a Java applet came up. And then for a split second, he saw what he claimed was something cigar-shaped, hovering above the Earth that was there. And it was kind of cigar-shaped with windows and a pattern. And then all of a sudden, that's when he was nabbed. He was nabbed when he saw that JPEG file.
That sounds like an Adamski picture from the 50s. But one thing I wanted to mention to all our MADSL viewers out there, something that people outside the UFO field perhaps don't know. And of course it cannot be proven, but it's let's call it an anecdotal myth. And that has to do with why we're at war now, why America has such incredible military technology. And there are those in the American military and others who claim that because of a pact with the aliens, that we have reverse engineered alien technology, and we are furthering their aims in sort of a devil's trade, if you will. We get military control over Earth, but what are we giving to them? That we don't know.
Well, it has been speculated for the longest time that what we give to them is the ability for them to come down and experiment on us. Basically taking, cells and the idea of the abduction phenomena
was supposed to be a part of the ticket.
Is part of the deal. We make the deal with the devil where we say, okay, they can come down and they can manipulate us. They can do whatever, because a lot of the reason why McKinnon was involved with this case, not just free energy, but he also was impressed with something called the Cash Landrum case, which Betty Cash and her daughter were in a car, and they saw this diamond-shaped UFO, and it was being followed by helicopters, military helicopters, and they both got some disease on them. They got something like radiation poisoning or something from the ship, and so they were thinking that maybe something was connected. He wanted to find out more about that. And so what he did is he went in to look further. But you and I went to McMinnville back when they had the UFO festival.
Great festival.
And it was a great festival this year. And Larry and I had the opportunity to speak with Peter Davenport, the National UFO Reporting Center. And one of the things that I said to Mr. Davenport was, I says, do you really think that UFOs are a threat to national security? And he got all ghostly pale on me, and he said, you're damn right they are, and here's why. And he went into this eerie story about a man by the name of Todd Sees.
Well documented.
Yeah, well-documented case of Todd Sees. And Todd Sees was a man who was I guess he was like a park ranger type of guy.
Yeah.
Who was looking at the deer in Northumberland, Pennsylvania, and as he was going and looking around and looking at the deer count, he disappeared. No one knew what happened to him. His SUV turned up, without him in it. He was gone for a long period of time. The case was actually reported as a missing persons case in the mainstream media, and in fact, it was in fact reported as an alien abduction, and then it was immediately taken out and said, no, it wasn't an alien abduction. This guy was on cocaine. He had excited delirium, which is this new idea that they have for people who have all these problems. But the scary part is that Mr. Davenport had given a description of what went on, and I cannot give it justice. And so what we want to do now is we want to roll for you the interview that I had with Peter Davenport, that Larry and I had with Peter Davenport, at the National UFO Reporting Center. You need to really listen closely as to what he says, what happened with Mr. Todd Sees and the alien abduction in Northumberland, Pennsylvania. It will chill you. Give a listen. Clyde Lewis from Ground Zero News. How you doing?
Thank Clyde.
Haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, it has. The question I have for you, do you think that maybe we need to reopen the idea that perhaps UFOs could be a threat to national security now that
They've
we're
been
at
a
time?
threat to national security for hundreds of years, potentially. The issue of Mr. Todd Sees, I was talking about the man who was killed. I was not aware of this case until somebody sent me an email and said, Mr. Davenport, why are you not following up on the mutilation of Todd Sees? And I said, what are you talking about? I've never heard of Todd Sees. He said, oh, yes, you have. Go to this case on your website and read it, and you will see that 4 fishermen reported to you a man being floated up a shaft of light into a disc over Northumberland Mountain. And indeed, I went back to that report, and I had checked it and posted it without reading the whole report. And there was an allegation that 4 people, independent witnesses, had seen a man's body being floated up a shaft of light into a UFO, a disc-shaped craft, I should say. And it was 40 hours after that his remains were found. Actually, they were not on the ground. They were suspended in heavy underbrush, as if the body had been dropped from above the underbrush. They found his outer garments. They found one boot up in the top of a tree. His outer clothing had been removed from him and had been neatly folded and laid on his all-terrain vehicle.
Didn't the media say, though, that they reported that he was, like, high? They said something like he was on some sort of drug.
Well,
I mean, that's what I read. I read the story when they talked about the abduction
3
case.
months after.
And you were the one that had the report in the National UFO Reporting Center about the case. However, they were, like, skirting around the issue, then said that he was on drugs or something, on his SUV or something like that.
That's what was said by the government. This is the same government that declared that I could not have access to the autopsy report. They declared, when I talked to the medical examiner of Northumberland County, this was days after the incident, he told me categorically that I would never, ever be able to see the photographs of that autopsy. Now, if it was just a drug case, why was the FBI called in? Number one. Number two, if it was just a drug case, why were all 200 or so members of the search party? They had horses, they had dogs, they had vehicles, and they had helicopters. Why were all 200 members of the search party corralled and rounded up and taken up to the nearby fire station and told that under no circumstance would they ever talk about this case to anyone? And they were taken up there under the pretext that they had to have their health checked. What does that mean? They had to have their health checked. Have you ever heard of a search party that was taken up to the local fire department to have their health checked? Well, it was not to check their health unless the government was concerned that they might have been contaminated with microbes.
Peter Davenport speaking at the McMinnville UFO Festival, talking about the Todd Seas case and having all those people that were involved with the case being taken to the fire station to be checked for something. In the Cash Landrum case, where she had something wrong with her, she finally died of breast cancer, but still, she did have something, and her daughter is blind right now, and the I guess you'd say the encounter is quite frightening, and many people who have had encounters like this have been their proof are the scoop marks. They're certain types of flesh, raised flesh, maybe sores on their bodies, things of that nature.
Right.
In fact, what I'd like to do now, too, is I want to show you another thing, another clip that we have. And this is, once again, Mr. Cerritos has provided us with this clip. This is a clip of a gentleman who talks about an abduction case where he shows, and this is some really scary stuff, he shows rashes, bumps, he shows indentations, he shows all kinds of other strangeness on the back, I guess, of his brother, or maybe of his, I can't remember exactly how this is. But this type of stuff is just fascinating, and it just shows that perhaps the alien invasion is more than an alien invasion, that it could very well be an infestation of some kind, some microbial residue, something left behind by not only the aircraft, but also aliens, if we do come in contact with the two-armed, two-legged, big-eyed aliens, if they really exist. I mean, you figure when Columbus came here and when all the other explorers came here, they brought with them what?
Smallpox.
They brought smallpox and other diseases. And so those are the things we need to think about, that if these aliens are coming here, they're probably bringing the same thing. So what I want to show you now quickly is I want to show you a clip, another clip that we have. And this clip is showing the scoop marks. It's showing the proof that these aliens leave behind or whatever on the skins of their victims or the skins of those who are being abducted. And how Todd Seas' case, while horrific, there are those people that have to live with the horror of having what is left behind with them, and that is possibly microbial disease or some sort of infection. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go to the clip now and show you this, and pay attention to what you're seeing here, because this very well could be more proof that they have arrived. So here's another clip for you.
Okay. The first thing I noticed on my brother's back. This is a picture of my brother's back. If I focus in a little bit, you see the bruising around the back right here, which is what I noticed. Here's a close-up of it. As you see the indentations, there's one here, one there, one there, one there. These actually look like bulbs here, bulbous, but they're actually indented. And this top one here. Now this top one became pretty much semi-permanent on his back. There's a picture of the bruise. This is with a webcam, so the resolution's not so good. But here it is again, and there's another mark there. Then I also noticed my brother was scratching at his ear, and that freaked me out, and I asked him, Jed, let me see your ear. Here's his ear, and there was this raw red mark on his ear, which happens to look a lot like one I have on the back of my ear. We also have had scoop marks in our family, at least these scars that we can't explain. This one is on my leg, inner left thigh. It has a triangular shape. Here's a close-up of it. The triangle here with what looks like melted edges. I have this scar I've had since I was about 6 or 7. I can tell you every single scar I have, and I've never known where I got this one. And it's also been weird that I've never really wanted to know until I saw it on a website that other people had these kind of marks, and it freaked me out. I told my mother about it. My mother also has the same mark, and I can go to the website and show you that picture if you want.
Yeah.
Okay. These marks have appeared on my mother when she was about 6 or 7. She does have a memory of what happened, sort of. She says she remembers something like a doctor's office. They were holding her down. They were telling her they were going to give her a shot. And she definitely didn't want this shot. What she remembers is screaming as they were holding her down, and my grandmother standing in the doorway. Now, my grandmother was just standing there, face impassive, just staring, not moving. And which is very strange for my grandmother, because she'd get hysterical if any of us even got a scrape. She would just go berserk. So having her just stand there doing nothing while my mom is screaming is a little weird. When my mom asked her about it years later, my grandmother didn't remember anything about it. Now,
We're back, and as you can see, as you saw in the diagrams, what he was pointing out to, some of the rashes, some of the scoop marks, some of the strange things we're seeing on the skin, and these are all left behind, allegedly, by extraterrestrials. And so, once again, Larry, we go back to whether or not it's physical, or whether or not it's mental, or whether or not it's spiritual. What do you think?
Well, I think, again, you have to sort of have a larger picture than those 3 categories. I mean, they're all connected. They truly are. Because something in the mind can produce a scoop mark. It really can. And part of what we're seeing is that the world, the collective zeitgeist is in a very delicate and dangerous moment now. Bramley's talking about the arrival of aliens in critical moments. Maybe it's the arrival of aliens that make the critical moments.
But you were actually one of the first here in Portland to bring up at one of the Ground Zero get-togethers,
right,
Morgellons disease. And tell us a little bit about Morgellons.
Well, Morgellons is a very strange, very, very strange disease. In fact, most doctors, even though there's a lot of people suffer from it, mostly in the southern states of the United States, but also abroad, that the medical community is turning its back on these people because they think that it's a hallucination. And why? Because the pathology of the disease doesn't fit into their textbooks. They don't know what it is. They call it the X-Files disease, just to kind of throw it away and say, oh, no, they're crazy, they're psychosomatic. But the point is that they have sores, and then they have fibers coming out of the sores. They have these.
Okay, now you do that again. There's sores on the skin.
Sores on the skin.
And then what happens?
We have multicolored fibers growing out of the sores. There may be an inch long. Some are blue, some are red, some are black.
Okay. And there's also, from what I understand, protoplasmic gel that comes out that's not blood. It's kind of pussy, or is it pus?
It's probably some kind. I mean, it fits all of the characteristics of some organism that we don't know what it is. We would have to call it possibly extraterrestrial.
With me today on the program, and we're very happy to have her with us today on the phone, is Lori, and she's calling tonight from Reno, Nevada. We'd like to welcome to Madisel TV Lori, who is a sufferer of Morgellons disease, Morgellons disorder. Lori, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Lori, welcome to Madisel TV.
Thank you.
Lori, I want you to tell us, how long have you had Morgellons?
Let's see. The external symptoms I've been aware of for about 2 years. I think the subdermal symptoms I've maybe had for 20 years, but have just been recently overrun.
Can you describe for me what the symptoms are?
Yeah, crawling sensation on the skin.
Like worms are crawling through your body?
Well, that would be subdermal. They're more like, to me, they look more like slugs, slug-shaped, than worms. These can be extracted very easily by applying mayonnaise to your skin, believe it or not, and letting it sit about 20 minutes. And then if you massage it and have little slugs and granules and things coming out of your skin, then you're afflicted.
So
but those permeate
are they fibers or are they slugs? Are they like worms, or what are they? Are they fibers, worms? I've heard the fiber stories. Is it fibers?
There is when you extract them from the skin, they're in the shape of a slug shape, usually cream-colored or white or tan. Now, if you examine it, there's a curly, long fiber in the middle of the slug-shaped thing. So it's to me that the fiber is the initial offender, and somehow it grows a body around it. I'm not sure, but all of them have this long, curly filament on the inside.
We do have some pictures that we'll be rolling throughout this interview to show people what it looks like. Now, you were telling me, and I spoke to you privately when I proposed. You first heard me on the radio talking about this. You heard me on the internet talking about this. And when I proposed it was an extraterrestrial disorder, what did you say about that? Do you think that it is something extraterrestrial in your opinion?
I believe it is not naturally occurring. So that could mean either it was engineered, much like the bugs they created to eat oil slicks, for instance, oil spills, and some of them maybe got away and they're eating us now instead. Or it could have come from beyond our atmosphere. I don't believe that it's natural. It hasn't shown up before.
Are you aware that there was also stories in the news, I guess it was, they reported back in 2001 in India, that there was some sort of an alien rain that took place, where they said that there was blood falling out of the skies in India, and they were saying that there was some sort of component in there that may create disease. Were you aware of that scenario?
Not with the blood droplets, the red rain. I've read about that happening more recently also, but I did hear about some kind of plasma or blood cells in chemtrails. I have heard of that.
Exactly.
And I have those. You know, they're quite heavy out above my valley here.
So they do. Do you think that maybe even chemtrails could play a part in this? I mean, there's so many things. There's white blood cells in chemtrails, and there was an article recently in CNN, on CNN News, where they actually stated that in India that there was some sort of blood that came down out of the sky that rained for 2 months over India, and they analyzed it, and they said that the blood had no human component, but it definitely had blood. It had amino acids in it, and possibly something from outer space.
It most likely is from somewhere else. I don't believe it's naturally occurring here. But regardless of the cause or the source, it exists. It's not psychosomatic. It can be photographed, examined, magnified. What needs to happen is these doctors, and I do not believe that they are just saying that people are delusional because they have not studied it or heard of it before. My experience and many others have been that doctors will not even examine or take a look at what a person is trying to show them. And I think they need to be held culpable, and I believe it's more than just neglect or malpractice. It's criminal, and they are perpetuating this condition, and we don't know for sure. We don't know anything about it, whether it can be contracted or whether it's contagious. But if it is, the doctors are definitely to blame for its spreading.
Are there support groups for you and others like you who may have Morgellons? Because I know that there are some people. There was a baseball player, Billy Koch. He had it. We have pictures up now of some of the fibrous material that people have in their bodies, and how it's just frightening to look at. It looks like it's alien tentacle type stuff. What are there support groups for you at all?
There was a marvelous forum on the internet that has been taken down. Now, how I don't know that I would have gotten through the early stages of this 2 years ago without that forum. It was very good to know that there were other people suffering the same symptoms. It was very sad to read of all the broken lives. This does not just affect the individual that has it, it's their entire family. I, for one, gave up my 5-month-old English bulldog puppy for fear that I might spread it to her, and that about finished me off, just doing that. But it affects lots of people, and you're not only that, you're slowly being devoured and eaten alive by these things.
Lori,
if that doesn't affect someone's psyche negatively, nothing will.
Lori, could you speak to the psychological effects? Because I know that Morgellons, in addition to the very bizarre physical effects, also affects the mind. Could you go into that?
I will only say, except for the general malaise, the neurological, psychological symptoms are consistent with being denied help and turned out and discredited, told you're delusional, being isolated, in my case now, for 2 years, while you're slowly and continuously being eaten alive by bugs. Now, like I say, that's going to affect a person's psyche.
Absolutely.
Well, Lori, I want to thank you for your courage in coming on this program tonight. I tell people to go to www.morgellonsusa.com. Are there any places else that you would recommend that we go to get more information on Morgellons?
Well, I've heard of morgellons.org. There's a researcher out there who does a lot of posting on the internet at the Cure Zone and Chemtrail Central by the name of Cliff Mickelson. He is also a sufferer, but he writes extensively on the condition, and what we need is a chemical analysis, and we need to find what kills it, and then we need to help the people. But in the meantime, it's as if the word has gotten out that if anyone mentions any of these symptoms, they are to be shunned and discredited.
It's like seeing a UFO.
It's just like seeing a UFO. When you say, Lori, if you see one, you're actually turned away and told you're crazy. You're vilified.
Exactly.
Well, Lori, I want to thank you for being on the program tonight and informing us about Morgellons and letting people know that this is a disease that is strange, and it is a disease that needs to be, at least we need to analyze it and find out what it is, because they do call it the X-Files disease. They don't know where it came from, and a lot of people are speculating that it may have come from out there somewhere. So, Lori, thank you for informing us tonight.
And thank you, Clyde, so much for covering this disease.
I'll be in touch with you.
Talking about it.
You bet. Take care.
Bye.
And that's Lori from Reno, Nevada tonight, talking with us about Morgellons and whether or not it is an extraterrestrial disease. She has speculated that it might be, but then again, she talks about chemtrails. She's trying to find the answers, and this is where we are now. Is this an alien infestation? Is this the idea that something from out there has come down? And they do say there's panspermia, the theory that life comes from out there, hitching rides on comets, hitching rides on meteors. We had that rain of blood in India. And then we have mega cryo meteors huge ice blocks falling out of skies in Africa and hitting the ground, and that carries with it a lot of other amino acids and things. So what do you think of that?
Well, as we said, I mean, we're in for rough times ahead. I mean, I'm not saying we're entering the last days, but I'm saying we're into the next few years are going to be probably the strangest years this planet has ever seen from a psychological point of view, because we're going to have to cope with diseases we've never seen, with plagues we've never heard of, with corrupt governments that don't care about defending the people and will only use it probably to install some kind of military rule. So it's not just dealing with the problem, as in Lori's case. If it was a rational society, they would say, oh, this is a new disease, let's try to study it, let's get some money, let's do some tests. But no, they deny it even exists. Why are they denying that it exists? Because maybe there are 100 or 1,000 others worse coming down the pike.
Or maybe it is tied to extraterrestrials.
Could be.
Maybe it is tied to something out there. I mean, we've had probes that have gone up, like the Genesis probe went up, grabbed some stuff out of a comet, crash landed in the Utah desert. It may have spread it. You've heard of the Andromeda strain. When Crichton wrote that, it was the idea that something had come down from this planet, the decontamination of the space shuttle, the decontamination of, it doesn't exist. They don't decontaminate anything that comes in from space anymore. People walk right up to probes without wearing anything
Clyde,
to protect themselves.
Think about it. I mean, this government has just set aside $20 or $30 billion to prepare for the bird flu, for Tamiflu, which is not going to work anyways, and yet there are much more virulent present dangers that they are just ignoring.
Well, I want to remind everybody one thing to close this show tonight, and that's this. Tonight we talked about extraterrestrials, UFOs, and the reality, and how it's been ignored because of terrorism. But I want to remind you of something, and something that you need to think about, and that is that we anthropomorphize our aliens. We give them characteristics that we have. But one thing you need to remember about creatures on this planet, there are more creatures on this planet that have 6 arms and legs and many eyes and exoskeletons, and they crawl around like little bugs on this planet. We're the ones that have 2 arms and 2 legs, 2 eyes and a mouth. But these creatures, there are more of them than there are of us, and there are smaller creatures, smaller microbial creatures that crawl in, and they can take over a host and render it dead. They can give us cancer, AIDS, CJD, whatever. New diseases around the pike, even Morgellons. This could be evidence of an extraterrestrial infestation. This could be evidence that if these beings do arrive here, they bring with them their diseases, and what are benign to them may be malignant to us. So this show is not here to scare you, but it's here to make you aware that the alien reality, or the reality of something getting in and taking over, is happening. And that if it's a disease or a microbial threat, that perhaps that microbial threat is going to be our demise. And eventually the Earth will have to change in order to make way for the new life form. I'd like to thank Dr. Larry Johns for being with me here for the Portland Alien Museum.
Mad as Hell is my favorite Portland show.
Thank you. And I'm glad you're tuning in tonight. I'd like to thank Lori for what she's contributed to the show, and also Dave Cerritos from LAUFO.com, who made this possible. Thank you.